Hi, this is Dr. Kaiser, and I'd like to welcome you to my BIOL 230 Microbiology course. The purpose of this video is to go through your Brightspace site and show you where to find everything you need for this course. It's very important that you become familiar with this site and know where to find everything. So what you're seeing up here is the opening page of your Brightspace course. Now, this happens to be for the spring 2022 semester. Of course, when you log in, you'll see the section you are currently registered for, or the semester that you're registered for the course. So we start out by looking at the blue bar at the top, the bar menu. Now, I'm in the instructor mode right now, so there might be a couple things up here that look a little different from your menu, but most of all the key stuff you need will be on your particular Brightspace page. So we see here we have the course home, content, assignments, quizzes, and grades. Those are the things you'll be needing. So when you first log in, it takes you to course home where the announcements are. Now it's important that you check the announcements every day to see if there's any new announcements related to the course. And what you see here is my welcome to microbiology, the first thing you'll see, and my philosophy of the course called The Big Picture of Infectious Disease. And there's also some very important announcements in red of some quizzes and exams that are coming up during the first couple of weeks that you need to be prepared for this. So make sure you read through that carefully. And it also tells you down here at the bottom, there are 2 videos that you need to watch. Now you're currently watching the first one, your BIOL 230 Microbiology Brightspace site. But also make sure the first week of class, in addition to watching the video you're watching now, you watch the second one, and that's how to use your course ARC detailed learning objectives to prepare for lecture exams. So that will tell you how to use the course ARC lessons, how to get the most out of them, how to prepare a study guide for studying for your lecture exam, and how to try to answer the think, pair, share questions that are included in these. So always check the announcements, but make sure you read this initial announcement because that has a lot of important information for the first week. Pretty much everything you need for the course is going to be found under content. So if we go up to our menu bar and click on content, that'll take you to this page. The first one, the overview, is just the same thing that was in the announcements. So you don't have to read that a second time if you've already read the announcements. Now, the course schedule, you can ignore that. The course schedule doesn't tell you what you're doing each day. It just reminds you of when quizzes are coming up or when exams are coming up. So you get automatically notifications of that. If you want to find out what we're doing every day in class in both lecture and lab, we want to go down to the daily course calendar. So this daily course calendar is set up to show you each day what we're doing in class. There's a lot of good information in this. So it tells you each day what we're doing in class. For example, if we look at this particular date for this semester, Unit 1, Lecture 1, we're doing on this day, along with in-class safety training. Then here we see we're doing Unit 1, Lecture 2, Lab 1. But also notice in red, it tells you whenever there's any exams or quizzes. For example, when your biology review exam is due or when your getting started course tour quiz is due. So the daily course calendar is very important just to let you know what we're doing each particular day in lecture and in lab. And also tells you when any assignments or quizzes or exams are due. The only thing not listed in the course calendar are your pre-lab quizzes, which we'll talk about later. Those are due on the day we're doing that particular quiz, as we'll see later on. So that's your daily course calendar. Now to navigate, once you're clicking through the course site, we can use the breadcrumb trail found right here. We're currently on the daily course calendar, so let's move back to the table of contents. Under content. And here we see the table of contents. So this is the video you're currently watching. So assuming you've already, we're assuming you've already obviously clicked on that because you're listening to this particular video. And here is your second video that's important. You watch the first week of class, because again, this explains how the course ARC lessons work, because that is your textbook for the course, the online course ARC lessons that I've developed. These are interactive lessons that are full of links, pictures, animations, photos, self-quizzes throughout the lesson. So these are very important. And in this video, I'll be telling you the general setup of the course ARC lessons and how to use those lessons to prepare for lecture exams. So again, it's very important you watch both of these videos during the first week of class or before if you get the email when I let you know the site is open. As I pointed out a minute ago, this is your daily course calendar that I showed you that tells you what we're doing each day in class. Moving down the table of contents, our next topic is syllabus and course information. So if we click on that, we see there's two things under here, the course syllabus and then detailed course information telling you everything you need to know about the course. Now, I'm not going to be clicking on each of these and explaining them. That's your job, of course, to go through and find that information. But I do want to tell you a few things about the Brightspace site. If we click on syllabus, we're trying not to use paper copies anymore of syllabi, so you need to print your own if you want a hard copy, or you can use the online version that you see here. So the nice thing about Brightspace is that anytime you load in one of these pages, such as your syllabus that you see here, if we scroll down to the bottom, you see that you can download these onto your computer if you want, and you can print them. And Brightspace does a very nice job of printing the course ARC lessons and anything else if you want a hard copy. But again, you're going to be using the online version for your studying, because that has all the interactive material that helps you learn what's important in this course and what will be on the exam. So if we go back to our syllabus and course information, the next thing listed is detailed course information under syllabus and course information. And I'm not going to go through all of this because that would make this video much too long, but I'll show you what's under here. So under detailed course information, you can find my contact information and the schedule of all my classes. The next one tells you the course textbooks and materials that are required. And I'll be covering this also during our first lab meeting of the semester. But again, your textbook for this course will be my interactive online course ARC lessons. That is your textbook. Also, we'll be using the online lab manual for studying and preparing for quizzes, but you will need a hard copy of the lab manual to bring to lab. We're not allowed to use any electronic devices like cell phones or tablets or laptops in the lab, in a microbiology lab, for safety reasons. So you do need a hard copy of your lab manual to bring to lab every day that gives you your procedure and a place to record your results. And it also tells you that you'll need a full-length lab coat that can be completely buttoned up. So you can read through that and see through the requirements, but I'll also go through this during our first lab meeting. There's also my course rationale and teaching philosophy that tells you all the learning tools I've developed to make learning the content of this course easier. There's a section on course evaluation for lecture, tell you how you be graded in lecture. As you see, lecture is 70% of your grade, lab is 30%. So this is the course evaluation for the lecture portion. And this link will take you to the course evaluation for the lab portion. Tell you how you're graded in lab, and lab again is worth 30% of your grade. This particular link here tells you how your final lab is determined. And I do want to click on that because there's an awful lot of quizzing and testing in here. And the way I have my gradebook set up on Brightspace is explained in this particular table here. This is the lecture portion, which is 70% of your grade. And this gives you all the quizzes and exams that we have in lecture and what percentage of your grade, of your 70% lab grade this represents. So you're getting started course tour quiz would be 5% of your lecture grade, which is 70% of your grade in the course. And then lab is worth 30%, and this tells you what each pre-lab quiz and lab quiz is worth, what percentage of your lab grade. Let's go back to detailed course information. This is a link that just shows you the date for all your lecture exams and major lab quizzes and your 3 assignments that we have during the course. Your pre-lab quizzes are not listed in this particular section. You'll find that under lab in a little bit. This is your lecture schedule. So this is what we're doing each day in lecture in a document form rather than a calendar that tells you what we're doing each day in lecture. And this is your lab schedule for the semester. And again, that tells you what we're doing in a document form each day in lab and when the lab quizzes are. The next one is my attendance policy and the work required outside of class. Now, the work required outside of class is rather important. So let me click on that. We're required by the federal government to put this into our syllabus. And so for a course like microbiology, which is a 4-credit course taught in a 15-week semester, students are expected to spend at least 2 hours per week per credit hour during the course. So what that means is during our course, you're expected to complete at least 8 hours of work per week outside of class, which will include reading your course ARC lessons, preparing for lab, and doing your studying, etc. If you're taking the blended course, you need to add another 4 hours a week because we don't have the lecture hours included. So that would be included in the time you're doing on your own. And keep in mind, these might be minimal requirements. Different students learn at a different rate. So some people may take more time to learn this material. Some people may even take a little less time. But the point is, this is a fairly intensive course with a lot of content, and it does require weekly work to keep up with this. And I can't stress that enough. The number one reason why people either fail the course, most people don't fail that are failing, they just withdraw from the course. But the main reason for withdrawal and failing is simply procrastination, not keeping up and putting in the hours you need every week to keep up. If you get behind even a week, it's very hard to get caught up. So I can't stress enough how important it is to keep up with your course ARC lessons and your lab every week, put in the hours every week needed. And people who do that are quite successful in the course generally. So back to detailed course information, that was the outside work required. There's a little section on classroom policies, including the importance of coming to lab and being there at least 15 minutes before lab begins. Because at the start time of your lab that's scheduled, that's when I actually start the lab, not when you come in. It takes a long time to get ready for each lab because you have to come in, wash your hands, put on your face shield, put on your lab coat, get your gloves, disinfect the bench top, and that takes about 10 minutes worth of time. So we don't have time in lab to spend lab time doing that. When the lab time is scheduled to start, let's say at 11:10 a.m., if that's your lab section, that's when we actually start doing the lab, not when you come in. There's a little section on audit policy, if that becomes something you're interested in later on. There's a section on hints for success, things you can do to be more successful in this course, which is worth reading through, and my office hours. So that's all the stuff that's under detailed course information that we see here. Let's go back to the table of contents and see what's next after syllabus and course information. So during the first week of class, you need to do the Getting Started course tour, read your syllabus, watch the 2 videos I mentioned, of course, and then take a Getting Started course tour quiz based on your Getting Started course tour. So when you click on Getting Started course tour, I provided, this is done using a course ARC lesson. So we click on this, and that'll take you to your Getting Started course tour. And this links you to the course ARC lesson. So these are the different topics in your Getting Started course tour quiz. And by Saturday, at the end of the first week of class at 11:59 p.m., that's the deadline for having completed your Getting Started course tour quiz. Now, this is an open book quiz. This will require just Respondus lockdown browser, but not Respondus monitor with webcam. So this is not a proctored exam, which means it's basically open book. So anything where you're not using the webcam is open book. But our major lecture exams and our major lab quizzes will require Respondus monitor with webcam in lockdown browser. Now, this is the only quiz during the semester you can take as many times as you want to get a perfect score, as long as it's by that deadline date of Saturday at the end of the first week of class. The importance of this, of course, is that you know what the course involves, where to find everything, how testing and grading works, when the exams are. You can find all that material easily there. And of course, some of the questions will also come from your syllabus. So you're going to be reading the syllabus along with doing the course, Getting Started course tour. Now, the other thing you'll be doing during your first 2 weeks of class is a biology review exam, which is the next major topic in the table of contents. And this is a review of the molecular genetics material that you learned in your biology prerequisite course. There are certain components of this that we use constantly during the semester, and you need to really be familiar with that material. So I provided you, if we click on Biology Review Exam, you'll see that I provided you with course ARC lessons that you can use to review that molecular genetics for your exam. So when you get ready to start working on that, you can click on Course ARC Lessons Reviewing Molecular Genetics for this exam. And these are the topics that will be covered on your molecular genetics review exam. So we have a section on polypeptides and proteins, enzymes, DNA replication in prokaryotic cells versus eukaryotic cells, RNA, protein synthesis. It's very important you understand transcription and translation. We talk about that a lot during the course. There's also a little section on mutation that you had in biology, and something that wasn't in your general biology course, but an introduction to horizontal gene transfer. Now, we'll take up horizontal gene transfer much later in Unit 2, but there are some terms that are in there that you need to be familiar with from the beginning of the course, since we do talk about that a bit. So just click on each one of these. That'll take you to a soft chalk lesson for that topic. And if there's any questions then on polypeptides and proteins, you can answer those on your biology review exam. And all of your exams and quizzes will be taken under quizzes, any online ones. So that's where you'll also find on here under quizzes, your Getting Started course tour quiz and your biology review exam quiz. Brightspace calls both lecture exams and lab quizzes quizzes. So anything that's testable online is under quizzes. Now, this also just requires you using Respondus lockdown browser. You don't have to use Respondus monitor with webcam. So again, that's an open book type of exam. And I do allow you to take that one 2 times with the higher grade recorded, as long as it's finished by the deadline date that's indicated in your daily course calendar. And in the second video, I'll be explaining how to use the course ARC lessons and how to prepare your study guide based on that. So that's your biology review exam information. Let's go back to our table of contents. Now, our next major topic under the table of contents is lecture. So this is everything you need for the lecture component of this course. And as you see, when we click on lecture, there are 6 units we cover in the course. I've also repeated your lecture schedule here, which I showed you previously, can also be found under detailed course information. So there's a couple ways you can find your lecture schedule of what we're doing each day, including on the daily course calendar. So of course, once we start in lecture, we're going to be doing Unit 1 first. So to find your course ARC lessons that you'll be using as your textbook, you would click on Unit 1 under lecture. And we see there's 2 things listed here. There are the course ARC lessons for that unit, which is your textbook for the course. There's also some voiceovers where I've gone through the lectures and through each page of the lecture in detail, but these are in soft chalk rather than course ARC. This is the first semester that we're using course ARC rather than soft chalk. About 6 years ago, I converted all of my materials into interactive soft chalk lessons, which I've been using as the textbook for this course until the college canceled the soft chalk license and switched to course ARC. So everything in soft chalk I had to convert into course ARC. I started that last summer and it took about 520 hours to do this. So I didn't have time to go through and make a voiceover video of each course ARC lessons. That's, again, would be another 200 to 300 hours worth of work. But I've given you my old soft chalk versions of these. Now, if you're doing the voiceover videos mentioned here, it will look somewhat different from your course ARC lessons because it's in soft chalk rather than course ARC, but the content covered is exactly the same. So the voiceover videos should still be applicable if you want to hear me going through each lesson page by page, although in a soft chalk rather than a course ARC lesson. But it's the course ARC lessons you want to be using, of course, to prepare. That is your textbook. So if we click on course ARC lessons for Unit 1, it takes us 5 lectures to cover Unit 1. So Unit 1, Lecture 1 would be our first lecture day. Unit 2, Lecture 2 would be our second lecture day. Unit 3, Lecture 3 would be our third lecture, et cetera, until we've completed all 5 lectures. So on your daily course calendar, when you see listed Unit 1, Lecture 1, that means that you're responsible that day for these 2 course ARC lessons. And it's your job and responsibility to keep up with these lessons as stated in the daily course calendar. If you have a face-to-face lecture, I don't go through every page and read every page to you. That would take much longer than the lecture time we have. What I do in lecture is to go through some of the more complicated areas and explain them. And I also use that time to do some quicker questions in class, maybe do some think, pair, share questions to help see if you're understanding that material. But you really need to kind of prepare for these lectures ahead of time to get the most out of this if you have a face-to-face lecture. That way you'll be able to follow what's going on more carefully. Then when your daily course calendar says Unit 1, Lecture 2, on that day, we're going to be covering these 3 soft chalk or course ARC lessons. Unit 1, Lecture 3 covers these 4 course ARC lessons. Unit 4, Lecture 4 covers 5 course ARC lessons. And finally, Unit 1, Lecture 5 covers these 3. Now notice some of these have omit after them. So anytime you're going through the course ARC lessons and you see omit, you're not responsible for that lesson. You don't have to read it. You don't have to know it for the exam. We're not covering that at all in the course. So what you do each week is to find out what we're covering in that particular lecture and go through and learn your detailed learning objectives for each course ARC lesson that's found in that particular lecture. And again, in the second video you'll be watching, I'll explain how these course ARC lessons are set up and how to use that to prepare your study guide to answer think, pair, share questions, etc. So I'll leave that for the second video. And back to our table of contents and lecture. Once you finish Unit 2, then we'll go on to Unit 3, or Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5, Unit 6, till we're done with the course. And as you see, when you look at testing and grading, you're going to have a lecture exam on Units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Units 5 and 6 will be combined together for your final exam. So your final exam just covers the last two units in the course, Units 5 on innate immunity, Unit 6 on adaptive immunity. Our next topic under table of contents is lab. Let me go up to the table of contents here to refresh it so we don't have all those subtopics listed. So your lab link under the table of contents gives you everything you need to know for lab. Now that includes the link to your online lab manual. So my online lab manual is what you're going to use to prepare for labs and to study for lab quizzes. Again, I want to stress, use your online version, not the hard copy, because the lab manual has all kinds of links. It has thousands of pictures, photographs, animations, links to other sites, lots of visual material that helps you prepare for lab and to study for the lab quizzes. This is very interactive with lots of photos and animations. So it's important that you use your online lab manual for doing your preparation for lab and for studying. So if we click on the link for your online lab manual, this will give you the table of contents. So during our first lab and the first lab meeting of the second week of classes, we do lab 1. The first week of classes we spend with introductory material, safety training, and stuff like that. So the first real lab isn't until the second week, and we do lab 1, which, as we see, is introduction to the microscope and a comparison of size and shapes for organisms. I'm going to take a couple minutes to show you how the lab exercises are set up in your online lab manual. Since that isn't covered in the second video just deals with your course arc lessons in lecture. So let me click on lab 1 to take you to lab 1 in the online lab manual. And once we hit discussion, then I want to show you how each lab is set up format-wise. So if this is a core lab that requires you viewing YouTube videos and taking a pre-lab quiz, kind of ignore that. I missed changing Blackboard to Brightspace on the online lab manual. So obviously all this is on Brightspace, not Blackboard. So what I've done to help you prepare for lab is I've prepared a bunch of microbiology laboratory technique videos where I show you how to do the various techniques you'll be using in that lab. And these are done from a first-person view where you're watching my hands do the actual videos. These videos I've posted on YouTube, and it's important that you watch those before lab if that lab has YouTube videos assigned, which you see at the beginning of each lab. If you see this pink box, then that's going to have YouTube videos and a pre-lab quiz. And what you're going to be doing then is watching these 3 YouTube videos dealing with how to use a microscope and how to focus, both low power and with oil immersion microscopy. So if you click on those, that'll take you right to the YouTube videos. There's also a link on Brightspace where you can also find these pre-lab quiz videos that you'll be watching. The important thing to realize about this is these are designed to prepare you for lab. Ever since I started posting these a number of years ago, I found that students who watch these and prepare will finish lab on time, and they'll generally do better in lab. If people don't watch these or don't really put in the effort to learn the material that we're doing in lab that day, then often I find out that the students don't finish on time. And we have to end lab on time. In all the face-to-face classes, the lab precedes lecture, except for one section where there's also a lab after lecture. And so I'll be giving you a 10-minute warning when 10 minutes before the lab is scheduled to end, and that means you need to start cleaning up, whether you're done or not. If you're prepared, you've watched these videos, you're following the instructions, you will finish on time. But we can't let you stay late to finish the lab and cut into lecture time. That's unfair to those who are prepared, because that's going to greatly cut into our lecture time if we start lecture late. We only have 10 minutes to get from lab down to lecture and get lecture set up. So it's very important, again, that you are prepared coming for the labs. And the quizzes you're taking on these videos have to be completed at least 2 hours prior to the start of your lab section. So these quizzes have to be taken prior to that day's lab. I don't accept late quizzes. The quizzes are a way to get points for being prepared. And if you don't watch the videos and don't take the quiz on time, you're not prepared for lab, so you don't get points for being prepared. Then we get into the actual lab. It begins with discussion. And so in this particular lab, this deals with bacterial shapes, arrangements, and forms. Now, again, you want to use the online version because that has all kinds of links and pictures. So there's a little section where you can review pro and eukaryotic cells. Anytime you click on a link, you can see it, either an electron micrograph or a photograph or a photomicrograph. Sometimes there's links to YouTube videos like these showing binary fission in bacteria. Then we get into the 3 basic shapes of bacteria, the coccus, bacillus, and spiral shapes. And then we find out that those come in different arrangements or forms. So the coccus or spherical bacterium comes in these different arrangements. Bacillus comes in 3 arrangements, and the spirals come in 3 forms. But again, you want to be using the online lab manual because it shows you all kinds of pictures of this. So again, we see a photomicrograph of Staphylococcus aureus there. We see a diagram that illustrates the different arrangements of cocci. So again, there's all kinds of pictures, including photomicrographs. So anything you look at under the microscope, I've included color pictures of that same thing that I've taken and put online, showing you what it should look like. And I've also included, in many cases, electron micrographs of the same thing. Bacteria, as you will learn in your first lecture, are prokaryotic. Yeast are eukaryotic. So we're going to look at one eukaryotic cell, and that's Baker's yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And again, you can see pictures of these, as well as electron micrographs. So again, you want to be able to look at all these different links. We're going to be measuring microorganisms in lab as a part of Lab 1. So we have a section that shows you how to do the measuring. Then we have step-by-step instruction on how to focus, which will also be covered in your YouTube videos. And again, it's very important you have a hard copy so you can review these as you're going through. You'll watch the video, but you may forget some of the steps. If you don't follow all of these steps, you're not going to see anything. It's very simple to focus, even with oil immersion, within about 30 seconds, if you follow these steps. If you don't follow them, you see nothing, and you're wasting your whole lab time cranking knobs and seeing nothing. So again, I can't stress enough, just follow the procedure and you'll see stuff. And again, it has lots of links to the pictures of the microscope that help to explain that. And you'll also see this in your YouTube videos. There's also a little section on how to focus with 10x, the low power. We only use that in a couple of labs, but you will need to know how to focus for those couple of labs. I also want to point out that every lab exercise in your lab manual and every course art lesson, or almost every course art lesson in your lecture, has a concept map. And these are very good for reviewing once you've studied. So you can find the links to these directly in the online lab or in the course art lesson. So this is the concept map for Lab 1. And these are mind maps or concept maps that basically tell you everything important you need to know for the lab quiz. So during this quiz, or during the Lab 1, we have to know the 3 different shapes of bacteria: Bacillus, coccus, spiral. Then we see the bacilli come in these three arrangements, the cocci come in these arrangements, and the spirals come in these three forms. And these are also interactive. These do not print out well because they don't fit on a page, but they work great online. So for example, anytime you see a little box here, if you click on that, that'll take you to an actual picture. So these concept maps not only tell you the content you need to know, but show you pictures of everything you'll be looking at or everything you'll be growing in lab. So these concept maps are a nice tool to use to help review material for quizzes once you've learned it, and to help you learn the material as well. Then continuing the lab manual, if tells you what microorganisms we're working with in this particular lab. Now, these are all prepared slides. We're not going to work with any living bacteria until after we learn aseptic technique in lab 2. And the reason you need the hard copy is so that you have the procedure in front of you, telling you what you're doing there. So this tells you step by step what we're doing in lab. In lab 1, you're going to look at prepared slides of 4 different bacteria using oil immersion microscopy. But again, in the procedure, I've described the arrangement and the shape for each organism you're looking at, so you know what you're looking for. And I've also included a picture that you can look at to see that particular shape and arrangement or form. I've also provided you some online demo slides to give you more practice of recognizing bacterial shapes, arrangements, and forms. We're also going to make a wet mount of baker's yeast, looking at some living yeast. And we won't have time to do this probably, although if you finish early, you might want to make a wet mount of your hair. I'll mention more about that when we do lab 1. And then the other reason for a hard copy is there's a place where you can record your results. Although keep in mind, I've provided you with color pictures of everything. Still, it's useful to write some of this stuff down. In lab 1, you're going to be, for example, measuring each of these bacteria in micrometers, and then telling me the shape and arrangement. So these are the 4 prepared slides we're going to look at. And again, I've included a picture of what it should look like under the microscope when you're trying to find it. These are the 4 online demos to help you further recognize shapes and arrangements. Here's the yeast we're going to be looking at. And if you get to the point of the hair, this is actually what a hair looks like under 1,000 magnification. A coccus-shaped bacterium, this isn't a coccus, but a coccus-shaped bacterium would actually be this big compared to human hair. Gives you appreciation of how much we're magnifying these. And then one of the most important parts of each lab exercise are the performance objectives found at the end, because these tell you exactly what you need to know for the quiz. So what you want to do for each lab exercise as soon as possible after completing that lab, or even better before, although I know that isn't always possible, is to go through and answer these objectives. Then you have everything you need to know for the quiz. So if the objectives fall under discussion, these would be theoretical questions on the quiz. Now you're going to find out that each lab quiz is multiple choice, matching, true, false, short answer, and practical. So there's many components to each quiz. Under discussion, that would be the theoretical stuff that would be tested for by multiple choice, matching, or short answer questions. So after lab 1, you should be able to state the 3 basic shapes of bacteria, state and describe 5 different arrangements of cocci, state and describe 3 different arrangements of bacilli, state and describe 3 different spiral forms, and describe the appearance of a typical yeast. Now, on the other hand, if the objectives fall under results, those tell you the practical questions I'm going to show you on the quiz. It tells you exactly what I'm going to show you and what you have to tell me. So the first one says, when given an oil immersion microscope, a prepared slide of the organism, and an ocular micrometer, you should be able to measure the size of the organism in micrometers. So it might be 1 or 2 practical questions on the first quiz where I'm asking you to measure the size of that organism. Using a microscope, identify different shapes, arrangements, and forms. That's all you have to do in this lab. Recognize shapes, arrangements, and forms. Not the name of the bacterium, the scientific name, but what shape is that organism? If it's a bacillus or a coccus, what arrangement is it? And if it's a spiral, which form of spiral is it? And also you're going to differentiate a yeast from a coccus-shaped bacterium by size. We're going to be measuring, and we want to point out that eukaryotic yeast are much bigger than coccus-shaped bacterium. So that's how we're going to tell the difference, by the size. Also in your online lab manual, I've provided you with a self-quiz at the end of each lab exercise. So if you click on self-quiz, that will give you a number of questions you can go through and answer. Jot down the answers on a piece of paper. And then to see if your answers are right, you can click on answers, and that tells you the correct answer for each of those questions. So that's a way to kind of quiz yourself and find out how well you're understanding the lab content. And you also find out when you do your course ARC lecture lessons that there are self-quizzes embedded throughout the lesson and at the end of the lesson, again, to help you test yourself on that particular section. But don't just click on self-quizzes and keep clicking until you get the right answer and assume you'll do well on the exam. That's only a small sample of the questions I could ask. Some of those will be on the quiz, but of course, the majority of the quiz or the lecture exam will be other questions. So this is just kind of a representative group of questions to see if you have a pretty good understanding of that particular section. And also because it's so important throughout the course, both in lecture and lab, that you can recognize shapes, arrangements, and forms. For lab 1, I provided 15 extra slides you can use to practice on. So you can click on any one of those and then tell me what shape and arrangement that is. And then you click the answer to see if you're correct. So that is the format for each of the online labs that you'll be doing. So that's your online lab manual under lab. Now, the second thing you'll notice under lab in your table of contents after the online lab manual I just showed you is there's a PDF version of the lab manual. So you do need a hard copy of the lab manual to bring to lab every lab. You don't necessarily need the whole lab manual, but you do need that day's lab in a hard copy form in front of you. Again, you can't be using cell phones, tablets, or laptops in the lab where we're working with microorganisms because of safety reasons. So you can buy the lab manual in the bookstore, which is probably the easiest way. That's all in black and white since we don't do color printing. But again, the online lab manual has color pictures of everything you need. But if you want to print your own lab manual, instead of buying it at the bookstore, you can click on the PDF version here. Click on lab manual. And this is the same thing you would buy in the bookstore if you print it off as a PDF copy. So again, that'll have the whole entire lab manual listed there. Now, again, what you can do if you don't want to print off the whole thing, because it is over 200 pages long, is you can scroll down to the bottom and download the PDF copy on your computer and then print off that day's lab if you want to print yourself. Excuse me. I haven't been talking for a while, being on winter break here, trying to get used to talking a lot. So again, you can buy the hard copy in the college bookstore, or you can print it yourself from this link. Now, after the link to the PDF version I just showed you, here's another way you can find the lab videos you need to watch for your pre-lab quizzes, the ones you have to take no later than 2 hours before the beginning of that lab to prepare for lab. So these can be found, as I showed you, in the lab exercise itself, in the online lab manual, the first page of discussion. But if you want just a quick link to the lab videos you need to watch, you can click on this. And this shows you the videos you need. So again, for lab 1, these are the videos you need to watch. Now, another thing I provided you with in lab are some course arc instructional lessons. And these are just kind of a quick overview of the important things you need to do for that particular lab. They vary in length. In some of the labs where we're growing bacteria, I'll be showing you also pictures of all the results, which you'll also see under the results section of your online lab manual as a reminder. But these are good to look at just to make sure you're doing the essential stuff you need to do for each lab. So if we click on course arc instructional lessons for your lab exercises, again, I provided one of these for each of the 19 labs we do during the semester. So for example, again, on our first lab of the semester, lab 1, that we're doing the first class meeting of the second week of class, this will take you to that course arc lesson. And what these do is they remind you again if there are pre-lab quiz YouTube videos you need to watch. Now, only 12 of the 19 labs have YouTube videos you need to watch and quizzes you need to take on those. So not every lab has them, but this will tell you right away if that has one. So it reminds you you need to view the pre-lab quiz YouTube video on lab techniques prior to coming to lab and take the Respondus pre-lab quiz for that lab. And those will be also found under quizzes. Those will be taken online, and those are done again using Respondus Lockdown Browser, but not using Respondus Monitor with webcam. So the pre-lab quizzes are kind of open book, but again, not your major lab quizzes and not your lecture exams. It reminds you these are the 3 videos you need to watch. Now, I've also, as we'll see in the next link coming down, provided you with a Zoom video where I've done a voiceover going through the discussion portion of each lab, going through it in detail, kind of like I would do if I was presenting this in lab, except in more detail. So if you want to hear me going through and explaining what we're doing in lab that day, you can watch these Zoom videos I prepared on YouTube. But those are optional, the Zoom videos. You want to make sure you record the results for the lab that day, and a reminder on every one of these, make sure you go through and answer and learn the performance objectives I showed you at the end of each lab. That tells you what you'll be tested on. That's material you need to know for the lab quiz. So each lab has this little brief set of instructions that reminds you if there's a pre-lab quiz YouTube video you need to watch, if there's a pre-lab quiz you need to take. It reminds you the videos you need to watch on YouTube. If you want to watch the optional voiceover of me introducing the lab, you can watch that. You want to make sure you can record your lab results, and of course, reminder to answer and learn the performance objectives, because that's what you're quizzed on. So those are the course arc instructional lessons for the lab exercise. Now, as I mentioned under these just a minute ago, I've also provided you with voiceovers, videos of me going through the introduction to each lab, explaining the background information you need to know and the procedure that we'll be doing. So these are optional, but if you want to watch them, you can click on that. And again, this shows you the optional voiceover video for each of our 19 labs. And again, I've repeated the lab schedule. Again, that can be found under detailed course information up at the top that I showed you earlier, but that tells you what we're doing each day in lab and when each of the quizzes are. Now, later in the semester, you're going to be turning in 3 lab reports as assignments on Brightspace. These are what we call case study-based identification of unknowns, where we look at major groups of microbes, especially those that are important in what we call healthcare-associated infections, the infections people get while they're in the hospital. We like to really stress that. And so on these labs, you'll be submitting a lab report as an assignment, and you have to write the lab report using the forms provided. So this is not a formal paper. This is a form you fill in. And so this is much later in the semester. The first one comes about halfway through the semester, but let me show you how these forms look like. So this is the form you would use when we do our lab 12-13 lab report. And this will load in a Word document. So this is what you're going to use to write your lab report. What you're going to do is download this to your computer, and it'll be downloaded as a Word document, and you go through this page by page and fill it in. So I'm not going to go through the details of how to do that and what that entails right now, because that's much later in the semester, but that's where you find the forms. And then once you have it filled in, you're going to save that to your computer, and you're going to submit that as an assignment on Brightspace. And I'll remind you more about that, of course, when we get closer to doing those 3 lab reports. But those are the forms we use for writing the lab reports. And again, they're found under lab. So that's the one for lab 12, the one for lab 15, and the one for your final lab project we do during the last 3 class meetings of the semester. Now, although they're under lab, because we're doing them in lab, this also includes lecture content. So what I do on these 3 assignments is these are actually part of your lecture grade rather than your lab grade. And that's your 3 lab reports. And the final thing under lab is lab safety. Now we're going to be doing safety training during our second meeting in lab the first week of class. We're going to do lab safety training and do the lab safety training quiz in class. And you have to pass that with an 80% or better in order to attend lab 1 the following week. But under lab safety, if you click on that, you'll find that if you miss the safety training we're doing in class, it tells you how you can register to do the safety training online and how to take the lab training safety quiz online, and then print that off and bring that to me. But you have to have passed the lab safety training quiz before you're allowed to enter lab and do lab 1. One of only 2 extra credit things in the course are optional crossword puzzles. And that's the next thing that's under our table of contents, the crossword puzzles. These are to help you learn vocabulary. So I have an optional crossword puzzle that's extra credit for each lab quiz and for each of our lecture exams units. So for example, if you want to submit an extra credit crossword puzzle for lab quiz 1, again, that's not the pre-lab quiz. This is the major quiz covering lab quiz 1, which covers labs 1 through 4, as you see when you look at dates. If you click on any of these, that will load in the crossword puzzle and give you the clues. So you would print that off, and then you would go through and fill that in and submit that to me by email. So all the crossword puzzles are submitted to me through my CCBC email. And if you complete that puzzle, then I'll add 1 point to that lab quiz grade. Now, you have to have these turned in by the day we're doing the lab quiz. I don't accept these late. These are to help you prepare for that quiz, to help you learn vocabulary. So it's a little late to turn in how to prepare for the quiz after we've had the quiz, with hopes you're going to get one more point for not being prepared. So again, just make sure you do those and submit them at the latest on the day that lab quiz is scheduled. And again, submit it to me via my CCBC email. And likewise, if you're going to submit them for your lecture exams, there's a crossword puzzle for each of our 6 lecture units. So the same thing, you would click on that, print off the puzzle, and email me that by the deadline date for that particular unit exam. And I'll add 1 point to your exam score if you do that. The next to the last thing on our table of contents is a little blurb about me if you're curious. So you can see in my other life, I'm a musician. A couple of bands, have been pretty much all of my life, and some of the instruments I play, although I've added a couple since then, a bass saxophone and a bass flute. But anyway, there's a little picture of me and a little blurb about me if you're curious. And the final thing under table of contents are some COVID-19 protocols that the college has. So you can read through those if you want. But the important thing to remember is that CCBC requires that you wear a face mask, which you provide anytime you're in a building on campus. They have to be worn correctly. They have to cover the nose and the mouth, or you're not allowed to enter class. Now in lecture, if you have a face-to-face lecture, we'll be doing social distancing, so you'll be 6 feet apart, and you'll be wearing a mask throughout the whole lecture. And again, worn correctly, covering the nose and the mouth. In lab, we take more precautions. In lab, we can't do social distancing because of the confines of the lab and the number of people enrolled in lab. So that's why we're doing the lab quizzes online rather than in class like we would normally do, because that would require way too much overcrowding, hovering over the same microscopes, trying to do the practical component. So your lab quizzes, your 5 major lab quizzes will be taken online using Respondus Monitor with webcam, and we'll be showing you pictures for the practical portion rather than looking through an actual microscope under crowded conditions. But in lab, it's important that you wear your face mask correctly, covering nose and mouth. That has to be worn anytime you're inside a building at CCBC. But also in lab, you're going to be wearing a face shield to help further decrease the chance of you spreading COVID to someone else if you happen to be infected or are asymptomatic infection. And those have to be worn correctly too. They have to be pulled all the way down so they cover your face, not looking like a visor on a hat sticking out over the top of your head. Also, you'll be wearing lab coats and gloves and doing hand washing before and after lab. And of course, disinfecting the bench tops before and after every lab. So we're taking every precaution we can to reduce the chance of any transmission in lab by using both masks and shields and the lab coat and the gloves and the hand washing. So that is your table of contents for lecture. Where to find everything. So I'd like you to spend a little time that first week just kind of going through the table of contents and familiarizing yourself with where to find everything you need. Now, the next thing I want to talk about up on our menu bar at the top would be quizzes. So anytime you're taking an online quiz or exam, you click quizzes. And before we do that, let me switch over to Learner View. That'll show you more what you're going to see for quizzes. So these are all ready to go. Now, as it stands now, our lecture exams, if you're in a face-to-face class, will be given in class using social distancing and wearing masks. If there are COVID problems that we don't know about increasing early on, then we'll be switching to online lecture exams. But right now, the way the college has it planned is you'll be doing lecture exams in class on Scantron sheets. But your pre-lab quizzes, your major lab quizzes, your assignments, all that's done online. So for example, the first thing you need to do by the end of the first week of class again is your Getting Started course tour quiz. This is the quiz based on the Getting Started course tour that I pointed out earlier, as well as on your syllabus. So as you're going through that, since notice that it says it requires respond to lockdown browser, but it doesn't say browser with webcam. So that means it's basically open book and that you're not monitored with a webcam like you are for some of the quizzes and exams. And by the way, if you're taking the blended course, then all your lecture exams will be online using Respondus browser with webcam. If it's face-to-face, the lecture exams will be taken in class. But everyone will be doing by the end of the first week, you're Getting Started course tour quiz. So it reminds you that that is due February 5th by 11:59 p.m. That's for this current semester. Now, keep in mind, if you're in a different lab section or this is a different semester other than what I'm showing you, that would give you the date for your semester and your lab section. But you can always find your deadline dates there as well. So when you're ready to take the quiz, click on that particular quiz. And it gives you some general instructions. But what I want to point out is that when you get ready to do the first quiz, you want to make sure you have the latest version of Lockdown Browser installed. So if you're not sure or you don't know, you can click on this link and it will allow you to install on your computer or your tablet the latest version of Lockdown Browser. Then you know you have the latest version available when it comes time to take your quiz. So once you're ready to take the quiz, you just simply hit Launch Lockdown Browser. That'll load in the quiz. It gives you the option of saving each question along the way. But most important, remember when you're done with that quiz at the very bottom, make sure you hit Save and Submit. Make sure you submit it or it doesn't get submitted. And if this is something that's all multiple choice matching true false, then you'll get your grade recorded immediately under grades on Brightspace. But keep in mind your lab quizzes, your 5 major lab quizzes that you're doing online have a practical component, and I have to grade those manually. So don't panic when you see your grade for your first lab quiz if it looks really low, because that simply means I haven't graded the practical portion yet. I grade very rapidly. It'll be graded the same day you take the exam typically. But you'll need to hold off a little bit to see what your final grade is on that particular lab quiz, because I have to grade that manually. Now, also you'll find when you go through the links that I showed you earlier under table of contents, and also this is in your announcement, to get you ready to do your first quiz using Lockdown Browser plus webcam. These are the monitored quizzes. This gives you practice to make sure you know how to use Lockdown Browser with webcam and make sure all your equipment's working. So I've provided a 3-point practice quiz with questions like what is the name of your instructor in multiple choice form. And that's a 3-point extra credit quiz to encourage you to practice using Lockdown Browser with webcam. Make sure you know how to use it. Make sure it's all working on your particular computer or laptop. So again, when you're ready to take that, you would log into that. And this will take you right to the actual quiz set up to use with webcam. So make sure you do that during the first 2 weeks of the semester, so that you make sure your system's working, you have the latest version installed, you know how the webcam works or the computer camera works, and you know your system's working properly. When you're ready to do your biology review exam, you can click on that. And then all your lab pre-tests, the ones you have to take 2 hours prior to that day's lab, again, are all done using Lockdown Browser. You don't need the monitor with webcam on that. So the lab pre-tests are basically, again, open book or open computer to do. So when you're ready to do those, just click on those, and then you'll get your results back immediately. Now you only get to take these one time, these lab pre-tests. So the idea is to go through and study the material enough where you can answer the questions correctly. So these are the pre-tests for each of the labs that have a lab quiz pre-test, 12 of the 19 labs that we do. If you don't see a lab listed, notice there is no pre-test for labs 7, 8, 9, and 10. So those particular labs have no YouTube videos to watch and no lab quiz pre-test to take. So the labs that have the pre-tests and the videos to watch are the ones listed here. And when it comes time to actually do your lab quizzes, they're all set to go too, but remember those will use Lockdown Browser plus webcam. So that is monitored. So you want to make sure you've taken that pre-quiz, practice pre-quiz, to make sure your equipment's working right by the day you take that first lab quiz. And that's the 5 major lab quizzes we have. If you're in the blended class, then you'll see later on, it also gives you your lecture exams, which will be taken online using Lockdown Browser plus webcam. If you're in the face-to-face class, as it stands now at least, you'll be taking your lecture exams in class on paper. So that's where you find all the quizzes that are taken online. Then you have your 3 lab reports we're going to do. For labs 12, 15, and your final lab project, they're found under assignments. So to get ready to do these, you want to click on assignments. And here's your 3 reports you'll be submitting. So let's say you're ready to do lab 12 report. When we finish that lab, it gives you information on that and how to submit the report in detail there. It'll give you the due dates for your particular class. And notice for each of these 3 reports, I provided you with a rubric. I grade your assignments using this rubric. So if you want to receive maximum points on those 3 lab reports, and keep in mind that's part of your lecture grade. So putting in a little effort and thinking there, this is a nice way to help your lecture grade with these 3, because it does include content that we normally cover in lecture. So you go through each section that you fill in, and this tells you how you could earn 3 points or 2 points or 1 point or no points for that particular section. So don't forget to also look at the rubric when you're doing your lab report to get maximum points, and to also read the instructions listed in the Word document you're filling out. I give you detailed instructions there, what I'm looking for in each section as well. So you fill in that Word document that you find under Lab, under Table of Contents, and then you save that to your computer. And once you've finished writing that, then you're ready to submit it. So you can submit it by simply add a file, and you would load in that Word document that you've completed. And once you've loaded that in, hit submit, and that will be submitted for me to grade. Those could take a couple of days to grade because that requires a lot more grading. That's all manual grading. So that's your 3 lab reports. And again, they're all found under assignments. One for lab 12, lab 15, and your final lab report. And finally, of course, to check your grades, you can just go under grades and click on that. And that will show you the particular grade you've earned on that lab quiz or lecture exam. If you're doing face-to-face in-class lectures, I grade them usually the same day you take them, so they'll be recorded very quickly. Keep in mind, if it's a major lab quiz, though, with a practical component, part of that will have to be graded manually. So the first grade you see reported immediately is just how you did on the multiple choice matching true false part, but you'll have 0 recorded for all the practical questions until I've graded that. So again, don't panic if you see you got 20 out of 40. If the practical part isn't graded yet, you just have to wait a little while for me to grade it, and then the completed grade will be up there. But again, I grade them the same day you take them, so you get your results back quickly. So that is a look at your Brightspace page for my BIOL 230 microbiology course. I look forward to seeing you all in lab the first week of class. On the very first day, we'll be doing introductory material in both lab and lecture. On the second class meeting of that week, we'll be starting in on lecture and doing safety training in lab. And then the second week, we actually start doing real labs. So I look forward to meeting you all. I hope you enjoy this course. Pretty much everyone taking this course is going into a medically related field. You'll see that when you read the section on my teaching philosophy and my big picture of infectious disease. I've tried to make this course relevant to the vast majority of all my students. Pretty much everyone taking BIOL 230 is taking it because they're going into some medical profession, nursing school, dental hygiene, PA school, or whatever. And so I've tried to make this course as relevant as possible. I give the same content you get in any college level micro course, but I've geared it towards the population of my students taking that. But this is equally valuable if you have to be a biology major and not going into any allied health field. I have very few that are just strictly biology majors. But again, it gives you the same content you get in a college level micro course and gives you a lot of important information about infectious diseases. And we'll be having some rather relevant stuff coming up in there too. I do have a whole course arc lecture unit on the life cycle of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. And later on, under immunization, I have a course arc lesson on the messenger RNA vaccines and how they work and how they stimulate both humoral and cell-mediated immunity to give a really great body defense. So anyway, don't forget to watch those 2 videos. You already watched one of them. That's this one. Watch the second one. Make sure you check the announcements frequently and check your daily course calendar on Brightspace to make sure you know what we're doing each day in lecture and lab. And I look forward to seeing you all the first week of class. Hope we have a great semester. Take care.